Hey everyone, I'm really excited to be here. It's going to be a neat experience. It's the first experience for me doing a webcast, so if I make any mistakes, bear with me, and I'm excited to hear your questions. Toward the end of the broadcast. If you do have questions while I'm speaking, go ahead and raise them as Yasmina was talking about, and she'll see if there's common themes among them. And if there are, then we can address them in the middle of the presentation. Otherwise, I hope to address as many end questions toward the end of the presentation. So with that, I think I'll start. Hopefully Yasmina has shared and my presentation, screen sharing presentation is up for everyone. Is that correct, Yasmina?
Yes, we can see it, Jim.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm Jim Blomo. Thanks for the great intro, and I'm an engineering manager here at Yelp. I've also been a regular engineer here as well as a tech lead. And at UC Berkeley, I lecture a couple classes, typically on Fridays for the School of Information. So there's a lot of great information out there about kind of the tactics of data mining itself. But in this presentation, I kind of want to take a step back and talk about how we think about data mining teams and how we build them at Yelp. So overall, the steps I'm going to be talking about here are starting with a kind of core group of engineers, full stack engineers with a great mind, a great eye for data, and then demonstrating success of using data with data-driven products. And that lets you grow your team along with your business value at the same time. We're going to talk about some of the anti-patterns there that I've seen. And then finally, once you've demonstrated that success, hiring folks to fill in the needs for the improvement areas for your product. And once you get to a good place with your products, a lot of times the hires that you need to make will become much more apparent than if you tried to hire kind of data scientists in a vacuum. So one of the questions that I want to address is like data-driven. What does that mean and why is it new, right? Companies have always kind of used data to make decisions. You don't hear about data-blind cultures or cultures that hate data. You never hear a CEO coming on one of these calls and saying like, screw data, it sucks. No one should use it. So what's the difference? Like, why are people talking about big data and data-driven as if it's new? And I think the answer to that question is the advantage that you could take of data in your products. So for me and for Yelp, one of the big things that's different about data-driven cultures and data-driven products is that decisions are made at every level using data. And data is used from all the different sources you have. And finally, we're using more and more sophisticated algorithms to better make use of that data and get better results from it. In the past, you've had a lot of technology or methodology around, say, sampling customers, doing focus groups so you could kind of get a handle on what your average customer wants. And the difference in data-driven cultures is you're actually looking at the behavior of all customers and using that all of that behavior and making decisions. And additionally, in the past, a lot of times those decisions that were made with data, such as what areas to move into or what new markets to try to capture, those decisions were done at a high level, at an executive level. And one of the other meanings here at every level is in a data-driven culture, hopefully you're giving power to every engineer, not just data mining engineers, but to every engineer to make decisions with the data that they have available to them. And so therefore, if you want to take advantage of the difference in data-driven culture versus previous cultures, you need to make sure that your teams are using data at every level in order to make decisions. Not just big decisions, but even decisions on a per customer level, like companies like Netflix are doing in order on an individual customer basis to recommend movies, or like Yelp is doing on an individual customer level to make suggestions about which restaurants to visit or which restaurants to review or businesses to see. The data-driven culture has robust solutions for collecting and storing all of that relevant data. Again, one of the best ways to make use of that data is to collect as much as possible and to use it to drive your products. And finally, applying appropriate algorithms to make use of that data. And that's the part where more experienced kind of data scientist folks can make a big difference, is understanding where they can get a lot of value from different algorithms. But I think it's important for managers and product managers to keep in mind is a lot of times the very simple algorithm is going to have great results, especially compared to nothing. And that's something we'll get to later in the talk here. So where do data mining teams kind of fit into that culture? I see data mining teams as fitting in as being the cutting edge for data technology at that company. Like I said, ideally all of your teams are using data to make decisions, but the data mining teams are the ones focused around products or features that kind of require big data infrastructure and algorithms in order to make them work in the first place. So because of that requirement, they're the ones out there looking at new technologies, learning new techniques, and applying it to their product before anyone else in the company. And so I see data mining teams for data-driven cultures as those kind of those lead people, the trailblazers. And that doesn't mean these data mining teams are kind of working in isolation. Very far from it. These data mining teams need to work with other teams in the organization in order to take advantage of all the data that's out there. Simply working in isolation is not going to work. Doing things like A/B testing or email testing, you're going to need other teams in your organization in order to actually implement those and see what the results are. So what are those different teams? The teams that you have need to be making data-driven decisions at every level. And so Yelp doesn't have one particular data science team or one particular data mining team. We have teams that are much more focused on the product or the feature that they're developing. So some examples at Yelp are ad delivery, those folks that are using data in order to improve the advertisements that are shown to our customers. The search team is another one that uses data in order to improve search quality and produce search-related features. And my own personal team, the one that I'm on, is the spam and abuse team. So we try to detect and filter spam across the organization. And a lot of that uses data mining techniques, such as looking at user behavior, understanding the textual content of things, and even looking at multimedia type stuff. So these data, when I talk about data mining teams, at least for Yelp, they're very connected to the products that they're developing. And they're using data science in support of their product goals. I've seen that done differently at other places, and often when you have data scientists or data mining people disconnected from a particular product, there's a couple of problems that they run into. One is they spend a lot of time developing some idea or doing some data analysis, and then they go to the team that actually could do something about it, could make a difference. And the response that they get is, hey, that's a great idea. Let's put it on the roadmap for 2014, because our roadmap's already full. Or they do or even worse, they do all of that work and say, oh yeah, we already kind of knew that intuitively, and we've already made a product change. So these data scientists or data miners that are disconnected from specific products often are not as effective as teams centered around some product or idea. And so that's how we develop these teams at Yelp. And I also believe that that's a really effective way of doing things, because you can gain immediate business value out of hires that you put on those teams, as well as, again, have a good idea of what holes you need to fill by looking at what's deficient in your product. And if you have products that are data-driven, you'll naturally need to start hiring people who are better at data management, data algorithms, and that sort of thing. So how do you develop and build those teams? Kind of what's the core of the talk here? So I think a good kind of set of principles to use here is finding the right people initially to set the core of the team, giving them the business context that they need in order to kind of run wild with their ideas and build a great product, and then slowly expand the scope of that product or the scope of that team as you are able to get more people and as the company sees the success that you've had in data-driven products. Have a roadmap for the future, so that, again, this is kind of applicable to many teams, but I think on data mining teams in particular, it's really helpful to have something that's driving the data science, that's driving the data mining, so that people know what to focus on. Because as many people here probably know, there's 1,000 different things that you can discover in your data, but knowing which ones are valuable and which ones you can act on can be really difficult. So having a roadmap for what you want this feature or product to do in the future allows the engineers on the team to kind of set priorities a lot more easily. Share your secrets. We'll be talking about that a little bit more. And then at the end, finding the right people again. I mean, as many people here know, the right people at the core of the team makes everything a lot easier. So let's talk about the right people kind of initially that Yelp has found useful to hire. So these people are often great engineers, but the thing that kind of sets them apart is their ability to ask interesting, relevant questions for the business, and then do whatever it takes to answer those questions with data. And a lot of times you'll find people from different fields, for example, biology or physics, as great engineers and data miners because they've been asking those interesting, relevant questions in the field that they were previously in. So, for example, experimental physics has a lot of interesting questions, and your success as someone who does physics is determined by your ability to kind of ask questions and then discover it somehow. And in the engineering world, at least in the Yelp world, that's really important. Being able to understand the business that we're in and being able to develop product ideas or develop interesting insights based on data. And then the does what it takes part is also really important. I believe that these initial people on a data mining team having good general engineering skills is really important, because to develop this initial product, you're going to need people who have a variety of computer engineering skills, and when they encounter problems, can address them themselves, again, without blocking or waiting on other teams. What slows down data mining teams and data scientists that I've seen in the past is inability to get cooperation from other teams. And one way to go about it might be to try to get more cooperation from teams, maybe more politicking in order to get the resources you want. But effectively, what I've seen is having people who have a good mind for data, but maybe are not PhDs in algorithms or computer science, but just have a really broad ability. Those are the type of people who can break through the barriers that kind of hold other people back. And so on my team, for example, when we've had problems collecting data, we're able to send an engineer to kind of embed in another team and start writing new log lines for our web application in order to collect the data we need. When we have trouble understanding or visualizing some part of our algorithm, we have someone who can pick up D3 and JavaScript in order to visualize the problem. And these folks, it's really important. It's both a mindset and a skill set that they do whatever it takes in order to overcome those. And these people are often trailblazers and leaders in their field, so that they can not only kind of break through those barriers, but leave a path behind them so that other people can follow their examples and other people don't have to go through the amount of difficulty that they do. So like I said, why is full stack important? I think it's important to note that in industry, data mining is not just about algorithms. In fact, algorithms is one, at least at Yelp, one of the smallest components that we have. Data collection, data storage, data processing are all super important parts of the job. And a lot of times you can, once you kind of find a pattern or find an interesting insight, it's very clear what type of algorithm you'll want to use on that. But just finding that pattern in the first place and then being able to run that algorithm over terabytes of data is one of the more difficult parts. And again, eventually you'll be able to grow your team and have people specialize in these different areas. But initially, you want to start demonstrating business value very early. And so having someone who has that full stack capability and can put all of these pieces together in a way that makes sense for the product is really important. So when we hire folks, we do lean toward people who have experience in, for example, Hadoop or Spark, Hive, doing complex SQL queries, having obviously a good knowledge of Python. And so we know that kind of when we throw them in the deep end with this data, they're not going to be sitting around waiting for someone else to deliver the data to them on a silver platter. I haven't seen that work in a lot of places. So that's why we start teams with these full stack developers. Now, so a quick interview tips for finding these folks. Obviously, you're going to need to make sure that they have the core set of skills, that they can code. If you guys haven't heard of like this FizzBuzz problem for quickly testing coding, you might want to look it up. The ability to communicate. So during the interview, talking with them about the projects they've worked on and the data they've worked with. If that is clear, that's a good sign you have a great candidate. Data mining can be a sophisticated, complex topic, but what you want from data mining people is an ability to express why it was important and what they did about it. And then you want skills that are kind of commensurate with their experience. If they have Hadoop experience, they should be able to explain the advantages of Hadoop versus other systems. But I think, again, what sets these initial people apart from great engineers, what can make them great data mining engineers, is this interview tactic, is to explain to them an aspect of your business problem that you have right now. Maybe explain that if you're Yelp, that you would like to improve your search relevance in new markets, for example, or if you can even bring it out and ask things like, how do we encourage engagement for people at Yelp? And candidates should, in return to your question, ask questions about what type of data that you currently have. Is it possible to collect this type of data? Obviously, they're not one of your employees already, so they'll need to make assumptions about what data you have, what technology you're using, that sort of thing. I think as long as they state those assumptions, it's okay that they're not dead on for what your actual business problems are, as long as their reasoning is logical and makes sense. And what you want to see them do after you've explained that business problem is actually, again, come up with ideas or questions of their own that could be answered with data. And then you want to continue walking them through that whole process till they develop a full solution for the problem. And what a full solution looks like is some ideas about what technology to use, some ideas about what algorithms to use, even if they're very simple. And how are they going to put this into production? How are they going to verify that it's going to be working? How are they going to do testing? So what I mean by full solution is, ideally you can set them loose on your problems, and they'll be able to at least architect and start building these systems, at least a very early version, and doing it without a lot of supervision. So once you've hired these people, kind of what do you do with them, right? So I think your job as a manager or as a product manager or an executive is to be able to set concrete business goals and concrete context for these folks. And again, it's about letting them know what problems you're having so that they can address those problems with the data you have. And their job is to discover, prioritize, and solve the technical problems that are getting in the way of these concrete business goals. Again, you need kind of self-starters in order to do that. And DJ Patel had a phrase that I really love about what engineers should focus on, and it's to knock the socks off the company in 90 days. And it's possible. That's the bar that you need to set for new hires. Within 90 days, kind of amaze people with the effectiveness of the data at your company. And setting that 90 days is really nice, right? Goals are a dream with a deadline. And it helps kind of put some urgency around getting an initial product out there, because that initial product can set an example of success and inform you on where you need to hire next. And again, this is very possible. We've had folks at Yelp come in and even on somewhat larger teams improve search click-through rates by 8% by going through and looking at the data, and have major jumps in advertising revenue based on some new algorithms that that person was able to apply. Let's see. So together, after you're building these products and working with this data, together you need to kind of build for the future. And what that means is not only is the engineer, again, setting a path for other people to follow. They're not just hacking out a product that's going to work for the next 2 weeks but fall apart at any sign of change. They're building a product that can be robust and survive a long time. And why you're doing it together is because you need to provide them time to do this and understand the challenges that they have in their current environment that an additional tool or an additional project or building an additional framework is going to solve. So while meeting immediate business goals is very important, making sure to build for the long term is also important. And providing and trusting the engineer to build for that is an important part of your job as well. and my job. So in terms of developing tools, again, you want to have these tools be able to be usable by other people in your department or other people in your company without those folks becoming an expert in your tool. So oftentimes you're going to treat this project as an independent, or if your company allows it, as an open source project, which is even better, because those open source projects often are expected to come with documentation, tests, and an expectation that the users are not going to be experts in the implementation. And that's what you want for the rest of your company. The icon here, in case you're wondering, is the mascot for one of our open source tools called MR Job, and it allows us to write Hadoop jobs in Python and then run them on EMR, Amazon's Elastic MapReduce system. And when we initially started using Hadoop, we were seeing that one of the bottlenecks to developing new features and gaining insights from data was the difficulty in writing MapReduce jobs in Java, or kind of writing them by hand in Python and using Hadoop's streaming interface. So we set aside time to develop this library and open source it. And now this library is used by literally every engineering team here at Yelp. And it's able to be used because no one needs to be an expert in it in order to get great value out of it. Some trivia here. The little guy's name is Shrupert McJobberson, in case you were wondering. Some buzzkills or anti-patterns. What kind of turns data miners off? Silos is a big one. We've been talking about how we want these initial engineers and then in the future, the rest of the team, to be able to do what they need to do in order to collect, store, manage, and get insights out of data. And silos really prevents that in a variety of ways. It slows down a lot of the information that they need to gather. It makes it hard to put up new features, and in general, it makes progress really difficult. So kind of breaking down silos in your company is an important part of allowing the data mining teams to kind of get to work to build their products. Again, roadmaps that don't include insights from data, this really frustrates data miners. And if you have data miners working on projects for several months and then they never get included into the product, or those insights turn out not to matter very much, it's really frustrating, and it's a drain for the company as well. And inaccessible data, obviously there's examples of this where engineers are not allowed to touch production data, but there's other less obvious ones. For example, having databases that are able to be accessed by engineers but are used in the production website so heavily that it's effectively impossible to run big queries on because it would slow down the main site. Or data that's in a format that only the original developer who started logging it understands. So ways to get around accessible data are making it a priority to have data sources for your data mining teams, and having a structure around the types and documentation around the data that you're logging. And a lot of times the documentation can be sparse, and again that points to why a broad set of skills in your data mining team is important, because instead of having to wait for documentation to be written or have someone explain it to you, a well-rounded data mining engineer can jump right into the source code of another team to understand what is being logged or what is being put in the database. And that kind of goes back to silos, where if you have code that's sectioned off and unavailable to your data mining engineers, they're not going to be able to jump in there and look at the kind of raw source of the data, which turns out to be very important in using that data in a production setting. So setting business context. So again, Yelp does not have individual data mining teams that are just around collecting data. They're centered around products. And when we rolled out search on our mobile devices, we needed data miners to be able to understand what were the important parts of search that are different in a mobile device versus a web browser. And so the search team, having both engineering experience developing those different areas and the ability to look at the data and see what was different about use cases in mobile and web, they were able to build a mobile search-specific algorithm as well as measure those results and communicate that value back to the company. So being able to lay out your future plans for your data mining teams about what you expect from this product and how you need it driven is really important. One of the bonuses here is when you're thinking about context for providing to your engineers, you can start using that context in the questions you're interviewing for. If you know kind of what features are coming up or what problems you're going to be facing, asking engineers to be able to asking candidates and to think about what types of data they can use in order to address those business needs is kind of double win there. All right, so expanding scope. After you've developed a product and have it launched to the public, you want to create a consistent set of wins where people around the company, all the way up to the CEO, are seeing what it means to have a successful data-driven product. And a lot of times, the initial people who you've hired to make that product will have a lot of ideas about how to improve that product. If you're hiring the right people, these folks aren't satisfied with the status quo, including the stuff they just wrote. So they'll have a lot of great ideas for where to improve it, and then it becomes more straightforward to hire the right type of people to kind of improve those different ideas. One important aspect of this is being able to celebrate wins. So when we have a great new feature launched, we have slides at company all hands. We have this system where Yelp has a set of core values, and when an engineer or a data mining engineer especially meets these or demonstrates these core values for Yelp, we have a special slide that celebrates that aspect. Blog posts are another great way to both show internally and externally the great work that you're doing in using data to drive products. So as you expand these ideas, you'll want to expand slowly in tandem with the amount of hiring that you're able to do. And as you expand, you could expand into, for example, better algorithms that are needed for this product, using more and more data, or moving to more sophisticated data platforms. And depending on what areas you want to move into, you can hire the right people who have both more specific skill sets and a more specific desire to be in those areas. Not everyone is super interested in being a full-stack engineer, so at this point you could start hiring folks who want to specialize a little bit more. And as you're expanding, setting that roadmap for what you want to accomplish becomes more and more important. When you're just starting out, being able to set broad goals for your initial engineers is great, but as you hire more and more folks, there's more and more things to do, and so staying specific about where you want to be going long term is an important part of growing the team and keeping them focused. Keeping in mind these kind of meta visions or meta goals helps me figure out what's right for my team. One is collecting and using more data. So we want to allow every employee to create and use data. And I think for engineers, that's a pretty straightforward proposition. They kind of know what's possible to be collected and kind of how to collect it. I think some of the more interesting areas for some companies is using the data mining teams to broaden the horizon of other departments. For example, sales, HR, finance, and other areas. You want, if it's in your company's, if it's in your team's purview, working with less technical teams to help those employees create data, and then for your team to use that data in service to your product is one of the great areas that you can kind of expand into. So for example, here at Yelp, we have a user ops team which does a lot of the manual curation, making sure that reviews don't violate our terms of service or that abusive accounts are warned. Before, those actions were recorded in logs somewhere, but not really in a way that we could make use of. And so one of the areas that my team is expanding in is being able to collect that sort of data and work with them in order to understand their workflow and how we can use that data to improve the abuse and filtering that we do. And kind of hand in hand with that is allowing the people on your team, and again, maybe less technical people, to amplify their everyday decisions. And I have here, every human decision should be a teaching opportunity. Usually that teaching is teaching in the kind of machine learning sense, where you're able to take those decisions and automate the easy ones. And so what can your teams be doing in order to improve the decision-making abilities of everyone else in your organization? And as your team grows, you're going to be less and less involved in kind of those everyday decisions. So figuring out which decisions are super critical to get correct, and then figuring out how to measure them and ensure that they remain correct is really important. One of the last ones here is being able to share your secrets. And what I mean by this is, again, getting the concept of a data-driven culture out from the data mining team to the rest of the organization is a really important aspect of growing your team. Because as you show the importance of using data everywhere, you're making your team feel more special. You're letting them create bigger levers for the company as the rest of the company is using their tools, using their ideas to create even more value for the company. So my advice is, for the data that your team is collecting and processing, follow the rules that you want other people to do. Document the data that you're using and open it up to the rest of the company. Just because someone is on another team, maybe a mobile team or a consumer team, doesn't mean that they might not have great ideas about how to use data. And so if they have access to the tools and data that your data mining team is using, you could get even more value out of the effort you put into those sources. We have algorithm learning groups, so they're open to the whole company, although obviously it's mostly data miners who attend. But we talk about what are the more advanced techniques, when are they applicable, and what are the pitfalls when implementing them in code. So one of the disadvantages of having product-centered teams is this risk of not communicating data mining-centric concepts across teams, right? So having organizations and events that are intra-team is important to share these ideas, to share tools and techniques across teams. And then finally, open source projects. I personally am a big fan of open source, and in addition to a great way to structure development and make sure you have a product that is usable across your company, open source projects help you do everything from recruiting to events like this one, which lets you get out your message of what you think is important. And when folks for example, in colleges or in other companies are using open source data that your team created, it's a big factor in attracting more people to your team. So a couple of examples of these, MR Job and Firefly, are up here on the screen now. Just a quick show of what Firefly is. Again, it's a way to share data across different teams, and this is something actually our infrastructure team developed to look at server data, but a lot of our data mining teams are now using it as well to evaluate ad performance, search performance, and abuse detection. Firefly allows you to easily create graphs, kind of correlate activity, do week-over-week analysis, and it's all done in the web browser, which makes it very easy to share with other folks. So you can make a new console, send out a link in an email, and suddenly everyone has access to this console and to this data, and then they can manipulate that console, find other patterns, and contribute to the company value. So as you're kind of building these teams, hiring more and more people, working harder and harder, one question is, how do you know when you've kind of made it, when you have a successful team? And kind of ironically, I believe that a great indicator of success in growing these teams is failure in some way, of your data mining system being overwhelmed because so many people are interested in doing queries over your data. You're getting too many incoming questions about how people can use their data in different ways in order to drive feature products. And there's like too many people trying to pull data out of your system, so you need to scale it. All of these are indications that you've generated a great data-driven culture at your company, and kind of now all you need to do is shore up those failures, is to kind of keep the system running so people can really rely on it. And again, that gets more into hiring for specialty areas. And the specialty areas that we typically look at are improving admin interfaces. So actually, even on data mining teams, hiring folks who are great web developers, because we need an admin consoles to be able to understand what algorithms are doing or why they're failing, or to discover new signals and things. And then obviously data management folks who have more experience in things like AWS, EC2, EMR, Hadoop, and then algorithms folks who have skills maybe in MATLAB or R. Again, if we go back to that pie chart, recall that algorithms is a very small component of what your data mining team is going to end up doing if it is supporting a large product. And so typically you're going to need to wait a while to hire those folks who are so specific on algorithms that you'd actually be worried about them writing production code. And that's why Yelp is still focused on hiring outstanding engineers, primarily engineers. The background in algorithm development is often icing on the cake, not the cake itself. So our interviews focus on being able to have great software development skills, great software engineering skills, coding skills. But then again, we look for that mind or that eye for data, where people know how to use data, can look up the appropriate algorithms, but then implement them and get them into production in a stable way. I've seen over and over that data mining or data science divorced from the actual product leads to a lot of problems, and I haven't seen that solved in a great way. So again, the steps for growing great teams: hire those initial developers that can do most of it, but have that eye for data. Demonstrate success in your company with data-driven products, and then hire folks to kind of fill in those needs in order to improve the products that you have. So that's the end of my talk, although I can't step away without saying that Yelp is hiring. If it helps to look at the way that we describe data mining engineers, you also might want to check out this page and see what type of folks we're hiring for. So I think we still have enough time for questions, and hopefully that's going to be a really engaging part, because I know there's a lot of experience here in this webcast, and I'd love to hear what you guys are interested in or have questions about. Thank you.
Hi, Jim. This is Audra. I'm going to go ahead and read some questions that a few people had. We'll start off with one. Is there a place for statisticians on the team?
Yeah, absolutely. So if the statistician doesn't have much software engineering experience, in my experience, you're probably looking at waiting till you have a team of maybe 15 to 20 people before the skills of that statistician really come into play. The issue a lot of times is that you're starting off from scratch, and that almost any algorithm is going to be better than nothing. So typically you just need very simple analytics in order to make a big improvement, and further improvements that a statistician or someone focused on algorithms might be able to make are relatively small compared to that initial step. So you're going to be waiting to use those skills until you've made those initial steps in all the places your business cares about. So yes, there is a place, I believe, and it's later in the product's life cycle where you're trying to squeeze out some of the last remaining optimizations in a problem.
Great.
I'm sorry, let me tack on one thing to that. And this is all, keep in mind, this, with a grain of salt, this is all from my perspective in growing teams at a web company. I know there are organizations out there that their main business value is advanced algorithms. So obviously in those cases, people who are more advanced in algorithms are going to be more important. So I'll say for typical products, you're going to be hiring a statistician later. Obviously, if it's your core business, then you're going to be hiring them a little bit earlier. Sorry about that.
No problem. Another question is, are you parsing text to dynamically fill meta tags for best SEO?
So in terms of our SEO efforts, we try to use the standard like semantic web type tags, filling in information about the business name, the number of stars, that sort of thing, so that search engines like Google can kind of automatically get that information. to my knowledge, and this may be a little outside my team, but to my knowledge, we're not trying to populate those fields automatically. We're using the mostly structured data that we have already in the database.
Also, what is the name of the open source library that your team created?
Sure. So that's called MRJob. Stands for MapReduce Job, although we frequently call it Mr. Job here inside Yelp. And it's available on PyPy and GitHub. So the URL, I'm not sure if I put the URL here. Yeah, I did not. So the URL is just github.com/Yelp/MRJob, all one word.
All right, we have a couple more questions. How to balance long-term goals versus short-term wins?
Sure. So my approach to this has been listening to engineers and describe the problem and develop the long-term tools they need in service of the more short-term goal. So what that typically looks like is taking maybe an extra 10 or 20% time to develop the tool that will let them not only develop the short-term goal, but do it easier next time. My team does not have too many what I've heard called as like bug squashing weeks or unhackathon weeks or strong focus on like some long-term goal. We try to address those long-term goals in the process of hitting short-term goals. And there's a number of reasons for this. The primary one is I believe you wind up with much better tools if you have a great use case that you're developing for, and that great use case is the short-term goal. I guess there are maybe some exceptions to that, and for example, in this MRJob tool, where once the MRJob tool was in common use and we kind of hit that short-term goal, we did occasionally have months or sometimes even quarters focused on just improving that tool for everyone else in the company. And I guess that kind of walks the line between is that a long-term investment or a short-term investment, because you're investing in a tool which is going to be used long-term, but a lot of times the specific use cases for that tool are being driven by the rest of the company. So once you get that improvement out, you get a short-term gain. But in general, the philosophy is kind of building the road behind you as you get to your short-term goal.
How big of a role does Spark play in your analysis software stack? What resources have you used to learn more about this tool?
And just confirming, you said Spark, presumably the tool from Berkeley?
Yes.
Sure. So Spark so far we've only used it experimentally, mostly with the use of Shark, which kind of emulates Hive, which emulates a SQL database on top of Hadoop. So the direct answer is we've used it mostly for experimenting, loading a bunch of data that we needed to analyze dynamically. We're kind of in the process of using more tools like that. Redshift is another one that we're taking a look at now. So right now, Spark does not play a critical role in our production data flow, but we're taking a look at its usefulness with respect to specific applications written on top of it, such as Shark.
All right, we have one more question. Have you had a need for domain-specific specialists in the area of data that you're using, i.e. sociologists with knowledge of population dynamics, hospitality managers with knowledge of restaurants or hotels?
Yeah, great question. So far we have not needed those types of specialties. On my teams, my team or to my knowledge, the other advertising or search data mining teams. Those professions or backgrounds I have seen come in handy in some of our community management teams, the ones that are kind of reaching out to the community. Yelp has a small business council where we get suggestions and ideas about how Yelp can improve from the perspective of a business owner. And I've seen lots of people from those backgrounds be effective in outreach to those communities. But so far we haven't hired in engineering teams anyone for those specific specialties.
All right, that's all the questions that have come in, Jim. So with that, we are going to say a very big thank you to you, sir, for spending time with us today and for sharing all your knowledge and expertise.
Great. Yeah, thanks for everyone for attending, and thanks for O'Reilly for hosting.
Folks that attended today, we thank you so much for attending the event and hope you've benefited from it. We would like to let you all know that we did push out some codes to you all in your group chat and a URL as well. Jim is speaking at O'Reilly's flagship OSCON conference next month in Portland, Oregon. So we pushed out details for that. We do still have tickets left, so if you like what you heard today, Jim is going to give a really excellent talk about Yelp in the cloud. So we encourage you all to check out his session. Maybe even you can shake his hand and introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I'm a curious guy, so I love feedback about these types of talks and love hearing about what folks are working on.
Yay. Thank you again, Jim. And folks that attended, we thank you. This will conclude today's webcast. Goodbye, everybody.